The Chicago Bears took a quick trip out to Las Vegas, and guess what? They came out winners. Yay! Really? We'll give you all the details coming up. In baseball, the Chicago Cubs are preparing for their wild card matchup against the San Diego Padres from the friendly confines, while the Southside Hitmen, i.e. the Chicago White Sox, finished the year at 60 and 102. What does the future hold for the Southsiders? We'll give you our predictions coming up. The Ryder Cup came down to the ending. How did the U.S. fare? And we'll get a special preview of the Cubs and Padres with one of our favorite baseball guests. That and a whole lot more at Second City Sports. The Bears Monday Victory Edition starts right now. Welcome to the Bears Victory Monday edition of Second City Sports, the last one for the month of September. You're locked and loaded, and we're live and living color right here on Sports Soul Chicago, along with Miss LaKeena McGee, which is she. I am Sidney Bryan, you know it's me. You can follow yours truly on the Twitter, X, and the IG at SidKid80. Once again, it's SidKid80. That's SIDKID80. That's SIDKID80.
You follow my Kingdom McGee on the Twitter, X, again, IG.
Be sure to download that Sports Zone Chicago app wherever you get your apps. Please follow Sports Zone Chicago on all social media platforms on Facebook, X, Instagram, and YouTube. Please subscribe to our podcast. We're located at War Media Podcast. That's WARR Media, PODCASTS. We are on all podcast platforms, including the iTunes. And thank you very much in advance. Your support.
Like, share, subscribe, and tell your friends.
We're not unapologetically fun and we have very definite opinions. If you have any definite opinion, do not 2-hour extravaganza we call a sports talk radio show. You better hit us up at Sports Zone Chicago's Facebook page or Sports Zone Chicago on YouTube. Type in those questions and comments in the comment section. LaKeena will get the upper screen for you. But if you decide to troll and or do something silly, dumb, or stupid, I'll give LaKeena full powers to give your dumbos the bill and be a boot.
Toodles.
But before we begin, shout out to our live game. That's LIVE, live entertainment game. And checking us out live right now on Sports Zone Chicago's Facebook and YouTube channels at 12:21 p.m. Central Standard Time. But much love to the replay game. Checking us out on the replay, also on Sports Zone Chicago's Facebook and YouTube channels. Don't you ever forget our motto where we talk sports, music, or entertainment. We will provide.
We'll provide you with the best here on Second City Sports, of course, in our last show for Monday, September. We got our buddy Evan Altman for Real Cubs Insider from CubsInsider.com to preview the Cubs Padres series. Where will the Cubs go now that K Horn is going to be out for at least for this series? Anyway, we will also preview the rest of the division of the wild card series, I should say. As the White Sox, they ended with a nice win to cap off their season, and some disappointments as well. Ryder Cup, the U.S. Well, despite their best efforts, the comeback came up short against Europe as they retained the cup. Also, WNBA semifinal game goes to Game 5. A major college hoop star will be out for the whole upcoming season. The Bulls are enjoying their first day of training camp as we speak of the rest of the NBA as well. And we'll talk about the craziness that happened week 4 of the NFL and also week 5 of college football. But first, Sid, let's go to Vegas. And the Bears need a block field goal attempt from Josh Blackwell to hang on against the Raiders, 25-24. Caleb Williams had 1 TD for 212 yards and a reception. DeAndre Swift had 38 rushing yards, also 69 receiving yards, a touchdown catch. That touchdown catch that Williams threw to Mr. Roma Dunze. On the flip side, though, for the Raiders, Geno Smith only 117 yards, 3 interceptions. 2 of those interceptions for Kevin Byard. 2 TDs. Ashton Diddy had his breakout game. We warned you guys that would happen. He had 138 rushing yards and a TD. But okay. Well, first, shout out to our buddy Spiro Diaz who had to call this game for CBS. I know most of the nation had Ravens and Chiefs. We'll get to that game after the break, but most of Northern Illinois and most of, I would say, probably half of Nevada, say Nevada, got this game. This is Bears' biggest game. I'm just glad that they got Didi Kambwada, and of course former Bear Aaron Archuleta did get an exciting game. That was kind of like a lot of weirdness there. You could probably say this game should have been a blowout. Yes, I mean, I know Josh Blackwell, I know he made some comments after the game that Scott Daly, who's this long snapper for the Bears, told him that the Raiders' long snapper snapped the ball twice. That's what he did. Well, and so unfortunately, if they spilled the tea, so that kind of held it there. But Sid, what do you think about all this? Because I'm hearing. I've been listening to a lot of the both Chicago sports radio talk shows, and there's been a lot of Bears meatballness happening here. So Sid, what do you think about the game yesterday? So what did you think about the game yesterday? I think his Wi-Fi. Oh yeah, I think his Wi-Fi might be a little off, but yeah. So like I said earlier, right? I mean, it's gonna be. It's definitely one of those things where you're kind of like, okay, I know that they broke a lot of streaks. I know this is the first time since 2001 that 2021, I should say, that the Bears were able to win a game while giving up at least 23 points. So I guess they exercise those demons there. They go 2-2 going into the bye. So okay, you take that, I guess, if you want to use that part. I've heard folks say that, well, there will be plenty of time to talk about what's going on and such, but you can't really think that way. I mean, look, if everybody wants to use this as sort of you got to win these kind of games and such, okay, fine. But again, it's still one of those things where it's just like this team has shown that they're still far from a finished product. I mean, you let a rookie running back basically run all over you for 138 yards. Yes, thank goodness for Kevin Byard, who made that crucial tackle when they could have gotten themselves a little bit closer. I'm talking about the Raiders did. So, you kind of thank goodness for him that he was able to kind of get it all going there. But look, feel free to listen to your comments and stuff like that. Let all your grievances, about the window, if you have excitement, hey, look, that's fine too. It's all right there in the Sports Chicago Facebook and YouTube channels. You can do that going on there. Kyle Santos was 4 for 4 from field goal range, so we were able to kind of do that. And like I said, Daniel Carlson, of course, that was a nice block by Blackwell, but again, I think his longest was 52 or 53. They probably could have gotten themselves a little bit closer. I would, but it kind of felt like the Raiders were trying not to lose the game instead of trying to win it. So, you're kind of you backed into that one. You did. So I'm sorry if that's not the hot take, if you will, but that's just a kind of thing where if you're the Bears, you just gotta okay, look, you take that with going into the bye, but unfortunately it's sort of one of those things where you're just you just gotta, like I said, look, there's still, this team's far from a finished product. Let's be honest here. So it's gonna be interesting to see what the Bears can do. I know guys like Kyler Gordon, TJ Edwards, I know a lot of those guys were out, but even still, he should have been able to beat the Raiders pretty handily. So it's gonna be interesting to see what happens with this. But yeah, I mean, look, 2-2 going into the bye. That's all you can ask for here. But also too, like I said, this team is far from a finished product. As let's I can see Sports on Chicago, waiting for Sid to come back on here, giving him a second to set up. So let's see, let's see if we can try this again here as we see what happens. And now Sid, you're in the dark form, but oh boy, you gotta love You gotta live live, folks. We're doing this live. So, we're going to take a really quick break, of course. We'll, talk some more Bears, Raiders, and also the rest of the craziness that went on in week 4. Now, some teams are already in trouble with injuries. Also, there was a tie last night, but I have something to say about that, too. And also, Studs and Duds coming next to LaKeena, McGee, Sidney Brown. Hopefully, he'll join us again soon after this break. So, the Second City Sports on Sports in Chicago. More NFL week 4 talk coming up right after this.
Hey, it's your boy, the Superback, Sean Sierra, and be sure to follow Sports Zone Chicago on all social media platforms, on Facebook, Instagram, and our Roku channel. You can find us at Sports Zone Chicago, and on Twitter, we are at Sports Zone Shy. Also, be sure to download our mobile app so you can take Sports Zone Chicago with you on the go.
Got it done here. Ouch! And we're gonna make sure you lit this time. Ouch! You're not gonna get me this time.
Ow, Manny!
Oops! Let's try an easy one.
Every day, we take steps to keep the people we love safe, but some health risks are easy to miss. Ticks hiding in the yard can spread germs, like the ones that cause Lyme disease. Mice searching for food can spread bacteria that makes us sick. Mosquitoes lay eggs in standing water and can spread West Nile virus and more. Cockroaches are drawn to water in the home, leaving behind allergens that can trigger asthma attacks. Common pests can threaten our health. Learn how to protect your family at pestworld.org.
Hey, this is Corey McGetty, and I listen to Sean and Maya on the morning show.
Welcome back to Second City Sports on Sports Social Chicago. You find LaKeena McGee on the Twitter, executes again on IG.
You can follow your Shirley Sidney Brown on the Twitter, X, and the IG at SidKid80. Once again, it's SidKid80. That's SIDKID80. That's SIDKID80.
And if you got any thoughts and about the Bears Raiders game, and also as we talked some of the other games in the NFL Week 4, you can catch it right there on the Sports Social Chicago's Facebook, YouTube channels. So Sid, I know you get a chance. I know you were having troubles with your Wi-Fi, but what did you think about yesterday's game with the Raiders and the Bears? Sid?
Committed to the run. They ran the ball 26 times, but they only averaged 2.3 yards per carry. That's something. Although lean a little bit more towards the pass, and they averaged 2.7 yards per offensive. We talked about last Friday on the show that the Raiders' offensive line was not good at all, and we saw that the Bears different forced 4 turnovers yesterday, but not one sack on Geno Smith. Although Max Crosby. To be honest with you, LaKeena, offensively, it wasn't for Ashley Genty in defensively. Was Max Crosby. The Raiders would have got blown out, but Max Crosby, he proved to you why that he's one of the best top 5 defensive players.
Yeah, I think Crosby did well. To his credit, though, he actually kept the. He's probably one of the reasons why he kept the. The Rays stayed in it as long as they did. So for me, I think that was really like the big thing here yesterday with this game. So yeah, I think a lot of it was Crosby. I think Crosby definitely should get a medal for being able to at least keep the Raiders in it for as long as they were. So the fact that they came down to a last second field goal, well, attempted last second field goal and such, and it's going to be kind of interesting to see like what happens with the Bears, because they still, like I said, because I'm hearing like different people, how folks are with the meatballness. It says like, oh, the Packers aren't that good, or the Vikings aren't that good. We'll get to that in a second, but the Bears are just one of those things where like this team's far from finished product. Yes, I know you want to win these kinds of games where you win ugly, you don't play very well, but at the same time though, this isn't gonna. Look, you're able to get away with it against the Raiders. Like I said, let's be honest. If it wasn't for Crosby, that game should have been a blowout. 1 and 2, you got to think that down the line, you're not gonna be able to win these kinds of games down the line. So, to say that, hearing some of the comments from some people like, oh, we could talk about that stuff later. Like I said, this team is far from finished. They don't have a pass rush. They don't. You didn't see. I think you saw. I think you heard, I guess you didn't hear Montez Sweat maybe like once or twice during that whole game. Yes, Byard, did his thing, what he's supposed to. Yes, Stevenson made some plays, but like I said, yeah, you can say that, this team is shorthanded on the defensive side, but it is definitely just one of those things where you're just like, what the heck is going on here? So for me, I think, look, like I said, this is something that's gonna have to be addressed. They got the bye week. They don't play till, next Monday night against the Commanders. I know people are going to be talking about that, that Hail Mary that happened about a year ago. They're going to be talking about that ad nauseum. I know, I'm sure, Tyree Stevens is going to want to, have that in his realm. So, like I said, we'll talk about that, that game coming up, next Monday on our show. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there as you listen to see Sports on Sports on Chicago. LaKeena McGee, hopefully Sid will join us. He's been having problems with his Wi-Fi. So we'll hopefully he'll be able to join us again in a little bit here. But let's talk a little bit the rest of week 4 as we get into some of the games. We'll start in Ireland as the Steelers hold off the Vikings, and let's and that this happened early last night, but literally yesterday. But this is the first game on the Dublin game. Pittsburgh hold off the Vikings 24-21. Aaron Rodgers threw for 200 yards and a TD. Kenneth Greenwell was the gamer was the star for them. 99 rushing yards and a couple of TDs. DK Metcalf had a TD catch, 126 receiving yards. Carson Wentz on the flip side, 2 TDs, but also 2 interceptions. Justin Jefferson had his share, and also as well as Jordan Addison. They both had about 330 yards, but no TDs, and also. But it was really like the defense of the Steelers. They sacked, they caught a couple of episodes from Wentz, and also 6 interceptions, and also they sacked Wentz twice. One of those interceptions, of course, was from one TJ Watt. So even with this, they were still able to, to the Vikings credit, they were able to come back, and as we see, oh look, he's back in good color here. But what do you think about that double game yesterday between the Vikings and the Steelers?
It was a tale of 2 halves, as I'm sure you talked about. The Steelers came out on fire. Aaron Rodgers looked like Aaron Rodgers, despite a lack of a running game. It was about their defense in the second half. They let the foot off on the gas, and like you said, give Carson Wentz credit. The Vikings did come back, and they had a long pass play to Jordan Addison running down the sideline to bring them within striking distance. But here's the thing: Carson Wentz early turnovers really was the nail in the coffin. The Vikings with that bad start early. So give credit to the Pittsburgh's defense. I know there were a lot of Steelers fans there yesterday, so Pittsburgh barely held on to the win. But just like we talked about with the Bears, it looked ugly at times. It wasn't the prettiest of games, but there's no such things as are style points in the NFL. You take the wins you can get them. That's what happened to the Steelers yesterday.
They also had a lot of injuries too in that O-line. That could be something to look out for as they have to stay in Europe. They're going to be going down to London to play the Browns this coming Sunday. So we'll see what happens with the Vikings. Now, the Giants did get their first win of the season. They upset the Chargers 21-18. Jackson Dart threw for 111 yards and a TD. Overcame being sacked 5 times. Justin Herbert had 203 passing yards and a TD, but also 2 interceptions that kind of killed him. Omarion Hampton 128 yards and a rushing TD as well. But it was a costly win for the Giants as Malik Neighbors tore his ACL, and now he's done for the year. So yeah, I mean the Giants, like I said, they got their win. People are celebrating, but it's bittersweet because now Neighbors is out for the year.
Yeah, I watched the majority of that game, and I noticed how the Giants brought out Jackson Dart. He had about 3 quarterback design draw runs, including that first touchdown of the game on the opening drive. And you could tell that his teammates were excited for him. The fans were excited for him. And you could tell on the other side of the ball for the Giants defense, they played inspired ball as well. But when I saw the Malik Neighbors injury live, and he grabbed his knee, I said, "Oh, this does not look good." I'm not a doctor, I'm not a guy, but something tells me this is not right. He may be out for a long time, and unfortunately, those fears came true. So, good luck to Malik Neighbors. He'll be back stronger and healthier for next year. But unfortunately for Jackson Dart, there's still going to be an evaluation process for him this year, even though he's a rookie. Unfortunately, he won't have Malik Neighbors to learn from as far as playing with him on the field, but. We'll see what Jackson Dart, the rest of those guys are made of. Wan'Dale Robinson, Darius Slayton, some of the other guys who have to step in and step up. And we'll see what happens for the Giants for the rest of the year, because Brian Dable and GM Joe Sheen, their jobs are still on the line. Despite Neighbors being out for the year, their jobs are still on the line. It's going to depend on how Jackson Dart does between now and the end of the season.
Going to be very interested to see what happens in the Chargers. That's their first loss of the season, and a bad loss at that. So we'll see if that loss comes back to bite them down the line. Now going down to Houston, we keep it short and sweet with this one. We get us, Christine Mack from KXRP, we all had Houston, and this kind of came the way as we expected. 26-0, 2 TD passes from CJ Stroud. Woody Marks had a rushing TD. Nico Collins, Marks had a TD catch. Nico Collins had a 79 yards. So short and sweet. I mean, look, it was as we expected, so we can move on.
Yeah, move on.
All right. Going down to Atlanta. I don't know. Look, Atlanta got their second win. They're down. They're now 2-2 after that. Just getting blown out by the Panthers. They hold off the Commanders 34-27. Michael Penix Jr. Nice bounce back game for him. 313 yards and 2 TDs. Bijan, I don't know what the heck is. I don't know how he says his name now. 75 rushing yards for him. Drake had a TD catch as well. And also, Robbins actually had 106 receiving yards. On the flip side, though, Marcus Mariota, 2 TDs, 156 yards. Debo had one of those catches also, as well as Luke McCaffrey. So, I think, look, I don't know what to think about this Atlanta squad, but a nice bounce back win. And as for the Commanders, they really need Terry McLaurin and Jaden Daniels back.
Yeah, you could tell that the offense was not crisp. I'm talking about for the Commanders. And I don't know about you, LaKeena. I didn't see much of a running game from them yesterday either. But on the flip side for the Atlanta, Drake London, you mentioned, had a good game. Free Kyle Pitts, he was involved in the offense as well. So it was nice to see that from Michael Penix Jr. So the Atlanta Falcons, we talked about them last week being blitzed by Carolina in their whole opener. I'm talking about Carolina's whole opener, that you can't give away games like this. Inconsistency has been the Falcons' problem over the last few years. So yesterday they got back on track. Nice victory for Atlanta. We'll see if they can build on this going forward in that confusing NFC South division.
Yeah, we'll talk. Staying in the NFC South, of course, New Orleans actually kept it semi-close against the Bills, 31-19. The Bills ended up winning that game. 2 TD passes, 209 yards for Mr. Josh Allen. James Cook had 117 yards and a TD. Allen also had a rushing TD on the flip side. For the Saints, Spencer Wiley had 126 yards and a TD. Alvin Kamara had 70 rushing yards. Rashid Shaheed had 47 receiving yards, and it kind of was scratching your head with this one because a lot of people thought this was going to be a blowout. You kind of wondered, did the Bills play down to their competition a little bit? But then, thanks to Josh Allen, put the team on his back and kicked it to gear and took care of business against the Saints.
Yeah, I think it was a combination of both. When you look across when you say that your opponent is winless, you figure, hey, this should be no problem. We do what we're supposed to do. And we should blow these guys out, but give the Saints credit. Spencer Rattler did not look that bad yesterday. I know the fourth quarter, the offense only scored 3 points. Talking about the Saints, but Buffalo did what they had to do to win the game. If you were a betting man, you took the Saints to the points. I'm happy for you. Unfortunately, I wasn't one of those people, but Buffalo, they're showing you why they're the best team in the NFL. And the Saints, yes, they still have a long way to go, but those guys did not quit yesterday. I'll give Kellen Moore's guys credit for that.
Yep. All right, going to Detroit now. I know most everyone here in Chicago got this game as part of the CBS doubleheader, but Detroit, no problems with Cleveland. Jared Goff had 2 TD passes. Jahmyr Gibbs had a rushing TD and 91 rushing yards. Amon St. Brown had 2 TDs. The position for Cleveland, Joe Flacco, 184 yards, but also the Lions defense, 2 interceptions, and they sacked him 3 times. So you wonder, will he be on his way out by halfway through the season? So it was basically all Detroit. So we can kind of move on after this one.
Yeah, the Cleveland Browns got away with bad offense last week against Green Bay until the fourth quarter, but they couldn't duplicate that same formula yesterday. Detroit, they're showing you why they're one of the top teams in the NFC, and they took care of a lesser opponent yesterday, scoring 14 unanswered points in the fourth quarter to basically put that game away. As we said before, the Cleveland Browns, the only way they're going to stay in games is their defense. They got to get their offense to back them up on a consistent basis. That did not happen yesterday in that second half. Detroit dominated this game in the second half.
Yeah, Devin Bush did get 9 tackles and 6 solo tackles in a losing effort there. So yeah, that's really is going to be. They couldn't get away with it though against Detroit. So they were able to get away with it against Green Bay, but Detroit basically said, no, you're not going to do it this time. So.
You're listening to Second City Sports on Chicago City. LaKeena here with you, recapping yesterday's action from the NFL. Let's go up the coast to Foxborough, Massachusetts. The New England Patriots, as they dominated the Carolina Panthers 42-13. Drake May for the Patriots, 14-17, 203 yards and 2 touchdown passes. Chuba Hubbard for the Carolina Panthers, 10 carries, 49 yards. Stephon Diggs, wide receiver from the Patriots, 6 catches for 101 yards. I don't think I need to say too much about this game, except for Carolina is one of the 2 worst teams in football. The Patriots, as I said before, they're not going to go to the playoffs this year, but they'll be much competitive under former player and new head coach Mike Vrabel. I didn't expect them to put up this much points yesterday, but they were clearly the better team from start to finish.
Yeah, it's after Gibson scored that touchdown. You can tell how fired up. We know how fired up he always gets. Vrabel gets. So yeah, he was actually in his face like, yeah, it was actually pretty funny. The game was already like well out of reach. That was the second quarter. So that was a game. Was kind of like a laugher. If you stay with this game through the whole game, God bless you. But this game kind of went as we all expected.
Yeah. And going down to South Florida, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they trailed big, but mounted a huge comeback, which fell 6 points short as the 4-0 Philadelphia Eagles held on for the 31-25 victory. Baker Mayfield, 2 touchdown passes, 22 of 40 for 289 yards. Bucky Irving for the Buccaneers, 15 carries, 63 yards, and he led the team in receiving yards with 102 and a touchdown. Jalen Hurts on the flip side, 130 yards total passing in a touchdown. Saquon Barkley with the fake tush push and scoring the difference-making touchdown early in that second half. LaKeena, I watched some of this game yesterday live. Philadelphia, I picked them on our picks on Friday. They were the better team. We talked about them coming into this game that they didn't look like the quote-unquote sexiest 3-0 team in the history of the league, but they took control of the game from start to finish. They let their guard down in that fourth quarter. They gave up just as many big plays on defense as they made in the first half, but they did just enough to hold on. They're now 4-0 in the year.
Yeah, they also had a block punt return for a TD early on in that game as well. They actually are the first team to score consecutive touchdowns. That was in the first time that the Bucks punt. That was actually a big difference there. And again, they kind of let their foot off the gas, but they did just enough to win that game. So, it's going to be interesting, though. I know the defense for Philadelphia, I know they've had a couple of injuries, been kind of a next man up. So it's going to be interesting to see, more guys coming in and such. So I know Jahad Campbell had the lone interception there that kind of, sealed the victory for them. But, yeah, I mean, look, not the prettiest 4-0, but look, they're 4-0, so it is what it is.
Let's go over to the late games now, where we'll go to SoFi Stadium, where the Los Angeles Rams held on to a 27-20 victory over the previously undefeated Indianapolis Colts. Matthew Stafford for the Rams, 29-41, 375 yards and 3 touchdown passes. Kyron Williams for the Rams, 13 carries, 77 yards. And their stud wide receiver, Puka Nacua, 13 carries, 170 yards, and a score.
Yeah, this game was kind of like you didn't know what you were going to get. It was really the fourth quarter that everything kind of kicked into gear here. So the defense for the Rams, they made a difference late. I know there were a couple stops there and such. They intercepted Daniel Jones a couple of times, so that also made a big difference. So yeah, I mean, look, not the prettiest, but again, you can see that this was actually ended up being a pretty entertaining game.
Yeah, and we talked about this unit last year, LaKeena. We'll talk about them again this year. That Rams defense, I know they've been beat up a little bit this year, but their young defensive squad is still very good. As you mentioned, they forced a couple of interceptions off of Daniel Jones, and they made a couple of big stops when they had to. This Rams team should be undefeated if they didn't give away their game last week at Philadelphia. So the Rams will show you why they're one of the top contending teams in the NFC, and they had to grind out another win yesterday to improve to 3-1.
Let's stay in the state of California, going a little bit further north as the Jags upset the 49ers 26-21.
I told you!
Trevor Lawrence threw for 176 yards and the TD. Travis Etienne had 124 rushing yards and a TD. On the flip side for San Francisco, Brock Purdy, his first game back, looked a little bit rusty, 309 yards, 2 TD passes, also 2 interceptions. Christian McCaffrey had caught one of those TDs. Also, Jake Tullius had the other one as well. A lot of kind of a sloppy game. There were a lot of fumbles and such. I know Liam Cohen, the Jags head coach, and Robert Saleh, the DC for the 49ers, got into it a little bit. Got a little bit of a jawing match after the game. So that was kind of nutty when you saw replays of that. But the Jags, the injuries for the 49ers, you got to think that's killing them at this point. So So yeah, it's definitely that's definitely kind of paved the way for the Jaguars to pull off the upsets.
What did I tell you last Friday on the show, LaKeena, during our picks? Jacksonville needs to force turnovers and run the ball. And guess what they did? They did both yesterday. They started off with a couple of sacks and turnovers. And Travis Etienne ran the ball hard for the Jaguars, 19 carries for 124 yards in the early score. But in the second half, as you knew they would, the 49ers mount to the comeback. But the Jaguars did just enough to hold on for the victory. I think this is the most dominant I've seen Jacksonville play in a long, long time. Like you said, on the flip side for the 49ers, it's just starting to mount for them. They could have used George Kittle yesterday. They could have used a couple of other guys. I didn't know that Brock Purdy was going to play yesterday. He struggled early, but he kind of gained his stride as the game went on. But the early start by Jacksonville and them leading at the half 17-6 proved to be the difference in the game.
Yeah, that was definitely huge. And like I said, the injuries are definitely piling up for the 49ers. Also, the injuries started piling up for the Ravens as the Chiefs still took care of them 37-20. Pat Mahomes, 4 TD passes, 270 yards. Xavier Worthy had his first game back. He actually led the team in rushing, and he also had 83 receiving yards. On the flip side for the Ravens, Lamar Jackson, 146 yards, a TD interception, but he pulled his hamstring, so he had to leave the game. Justice Hill actually did score a TD in the opening drive for the Ravens. So I think you thought they were going to be in the rhythm there. And such, he also caught a TD catch. I'm talking about Hill did. Derrick Henry only 42 rushing yards and such. I know. I mean, look, I know that I was one of the three of us that picked the Chiefs. And look, I think with the injuries mounting for that defense, and Marlon Humphrey, he's going to be out for a couple of weeks for them. They're now 1-3, and is there a cause for concern? Well, I guess you could say, are the Chiefs back? Maybe, but like I said, they face a very depleted, Ravens defense. So you can't really say that they're back just yet. But is there a cause for concern in Baltimore?
Yes, especially if the hamstring injury will keep Lamar Jackson out multiple weeks. So we'll monitor to see what's going on there. But as we talked about before we went on live, I did watch the majority of this game opposite the Bears-Raiders game. And unfortunately, that's 2.5 hours that I cannot get back. But the Chiefs were dominating the Ravens before Lamar Jackson went out with that injury anyway, because the offensive line, I thought, for the Chiefs played well. And their defense, I know Chris Jones showed up to the stadium late, but he got dressed and he was available to play, and he did. So you mentioned Derrick Henry was a non-factor. After that opening drive for the Ravens, Kansas City said enough was enough. Unleashed the Patrick Mahomes that we're used to seeing him play like. He played like an MVP type quarterback yesterday. Are the Chiefs back? I got to see them do this for long stretches of time. So I'm not going to jump on the bandwagon just yet. Great victory yesterday, dominating fashion, but I got to see more for them to be more consistent. And we'll talk about this more on our next episode on Friday, but they're still going to have a tough task next Monday night on the road in Jacksonville, especially after what the Jaguars pulled off yesterday.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk more about that come up next Monday. Well, as far as Sunday Night Football game, we all thought it was going to be a blowout. It ended up not being the case. But as the Packers and the Cowboys go for a 40-40 tie, Jordan Love for 3 TDs, 337 yards. Josh Jacobs had 86 rushing yards and 2 rushing TDs. Dak Prescott threw for 319 and 3 TDs. Javonte Williams had a rushing TD as well. Pickens had 134 yards and 2 TDs as well. Romeo Doubs had all three of those TD catches from Love. And I'll say this: for all those, look, all y'all wanted everybody, both teams to have to touch the ball when it comes to overtime. Well, this is exactly what happened. So, look, Brandon McManus, look, he missed one of those field goals, so they probably would not have been that it probably wouldn't have been a factor anyway had he had made that field goal and had that blocked field goal earlier in the game. I know people forget about that. So, what do you think about this very weird game yesterday?
I'm glad I did not watch the whole thing. I was watching something else, but I got a chance to watch the end of the fourth quarter in overtime. And we talked about coming to this game that Micah Parsons was the main headline. He only had 1 quarterback hit and 2 tackles, so he wasn't much of a difference maker. But that Cowboys defense, which started off okay, but they let that guard down once the game progressed. On the flip side for the Packers, Romeo Doubs had a good performance with 3 touchdowns. Jordan Love looked like he was back. He had 337 yards passing overall. but both these defenses need work. The Packers, you could say they had an off day. I'm talking about defensively. Okay, I'll grant you that, but I don't like the way the games end in ties. Like you said, LaKeena, we're back to that new old rule as far as the teams touching the ball at least once in overtime. This is what you get, and the NFL got what it wanted last night. I'm sure they didn't want this game to end in a tie, but that's what you got. And I guarantee this will be NBC's second highest rated game on their schedule this year, even though we through 4 weeks already.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. They haven't really. I'm sure the ratings were pretty high for it, especially since it got down to like a tie. So there you go. There now. Yeah. So studs and duds. Real quick.
All right, my 3 studs are as follows. Let's go with Michael Penix Jr. of Atlanta, 20 of 26, 313 yards and 2 touchdown passes. As the Falcons beat the Washington Commanders 34-27. My second stud would be Jared Cook, the running back from Buffalo, 22 carries, 117 yards and a touchdown as the Bills beat the Saints by 12, 31-19. And my third stud will have to go to Travis Etienne, the running back for the Jacksonville Jaguars, 19 carries, 121 yards and a touchdown as the Jaguars upset the 49ers, as your boy told you on this program last Friday, 26-21.
I'll say the Jags as my studs. I also agree with you on Penix for the other stud for the Falcons and that great performance there, that bounce back win against the Commanders. And I guess my other stud real quick, like I said, I'll say the Eagles too, because look, I mean, it's not style points, but look, again, they can afford not to have style points. So the Eagles, you got another one there against Tampa Bay. Now, real quick, the duds. Baltimore, you wonder what's going on there. Is it the training staff? Is it like the way they're training? There's something's going on down there in Baltimore. They need to get to the bottom of that, because this season's going to get away from them quick if they don't do something. San Francisco, same thing. I don't know what's going on there, but y'all need to work on some of that stuff. And the duds, I'll say the Raiders for not blocking Josh Blackwell in that field goal attempt. I don't know what folks are talking about that part of that, because he actually was unblocked, but I digress.
Yeah, I agree with you with all those duds. I'll give you a bonus dud from that game. Geno Smith with 3 interceptions.
Ugh.
Not good. And the way that last night, Sunday Night Football, ended between the Cowboys and the Packers. Fit to be tied. I don't like games ended in ties. It annoys me.
Well, yeah, but look, this is what happens. Everyone say, well, both teams have a ball to touch the ball in overtime. This is what happens, folks. So don't whine about it now. Sorry. All right. Monday Night Football.
We have go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. We had 2 Monday Night Football games tonight. The first one at 6:15 p.m. on ESPN. It's the 0-3, the battle of the 0-3s between the New York Jets and the Miami Dolphins from Miami Gardens, Florida. Miami's a 2.5-point favorite at home. I think all of us took the Dolphins, so I think Justin Fields will not play again tonight for the New York Jets. Tyrod Taylor is at quarterback. Mike McDaniel I'm sure he's staring down the barrel of a pink slipping link card. So we'll see how the Dolphins come out tonight. And at 7:15 p.m. on ABC, we'll have the 1-2 Broncos against the 2-1 Cincinnati Bengals. Of course, the Bengals got blown out at Minnesota last week, while the Broncos have lost their last 2 games on the road in ugly fashion. The Broncos are currently favored by 7.5 points. I think all of us on the panel took the Denver Broncos. We both took the home teams in this one. Will you change anything?
No, I'm not changing it. Yeah, but especially since Taylor's going to be in. So yeah, we'll see what kind of urgency Dolphins play. And Denver, I think Cincinnati's going to play as bad as it against in Minnesota, but this might be a good this might be a good get right game for Denver, because they need it. And just for the record, the Jets and Dolphins will be on ESPN. Bengals and Broncos will be on ABC. No Manning cast this week, so just FYI.
It may not be Manning cast, maybe MIA for this week, but Second City Sports will continue to kick on solid ground following this timeout as we review Week 5 from the college football college football action. The final line in comeback fashion defeated the USC Trojans, while Northwestern gets an important win at home against UCLA. And we'll preview the MLB playoffs in yesterday's madness in game 162. And that and a whole lot more. You stick and stay right here on the Bears Victory Monday edition of the Second City Sports, right here on Sports Zone Chicago.
Hey, it's your boy, the Superback, Sean Sierra, and be sure to follow Sports Zone Chicago on all social media platforms on Facebook, Instagram, and our Roku channel. You can find us at Sports Zone Chicago, and on Twitter, we are at Sports Zone Shy. Also, be sure to download our mobile app so you can take Sports Zone Chicago with you on the go.
How do you take care of your mind health?
For my mental health, I meditate in the mornings.
I have my dogs. They're the best.
I just find ways that help me just relax.
Finding things that make me happy, like being close to my family.
I meditate a lot and read books.
I have hobbies outside of the game. I'm able to switch off. I'm able to turn my brain off from the game of basketball.
Your mind health matters.
Your mind health matters.
It's a romance sport. What? It's a romance sport like that.
Your Marine Corps' way of life is to defend the American way of life. Every day, no matter where we serve, we take a stand for our nation, for each other, for us all. The few, the proud, the Marines.
Everybody in a work zone is someone somebody.
This is my mom. She works for KDOT.
This is my dad.
This is my mom.
This is my daddy.
This is my sister.
This is my daddy.
This is my son, Scott. He was killed while working in a highway work zone. When you drive through a work zone, drive like a life depends on it. Because it does.
Welcome back to album number 2 of Second City Sports and the hashtag Bears Victory Monday this year. Locked and loaded, and we're live in living color right here on Sports Zone Chicago, along with Miss LaKeena McGee, which is she. I am Sidney, you know it's me. You can follow yours truly on the Twitter, X, and the IG at SidKid80. Once again, it's SidKid80. That's SIDKID80. That's SIDKID80.
You can follow LaKeena McGee on the Twitter, X, and again, IG.
As we kick off hour number 2 of this fabulous part, this college football and previewing the MLS and whole. Hit us on or type in question, comment in the comments. I'll get the up on the screen for you.
Go ahead to the college gridiron now. As on Friday, there were a couple of upsets on Friday. Virginia upset Florida State in double overtime, almost 30 years to the day that they did it the first time. I believe Tiki and Rondé Barber were on that team, on that Virginia squad at the time there. But, a nice win for Virginia. They stay undefeated, not just in conference, but also in regular season play. Also, Arizona State, they hold off TCU. And Houston beat Oregon State. It ended up being a thriller in overtime and late night. Going into Saturday's games, you got Ohio State. They got a little bit of help from the rest, but I won't go there. They did take care of business against Washington 24-6. But a big one here, Oregon. It was actually their defense that made some big plays late as Oregon beats Penn State in Happy Valley in a thriller in double overtime, 30-24.
I looked at some of that game live, and I know it was very much low scoring throughout. I was not surprised if we told you on this show last week on Friday that the Penn State is a very good defensive team. If they can hold Oregon, if they could hold Oregon at bay, they would give themselves a shot. Well, they gave themselves a shot, but Oregon's offense lit it up in overtime, and Penn State just couldn't keep up. So it was an entertaining finish, but Oregon was the team, and they came out there with a victory in double overtime. Do I think Penn State is still in the driver's seat to get one of those to beef up that offense? James Franklin has a lot of work to do. Their defense is solid, but they got to give him a little bit more credit.
Definitely got to give their running Nick Singleton. I guess I got to give him the ball more now. Ole Miss, in a mild upset, they beat LSU 24-19. Trinidad Chambers, who wasn't even starting for Ole Miss a few weeks ago, now he helped pull off a pretty big upset. He had 314 yards and a TD. He also had 71 rushing yards and such. So it was actually him kind of leading the way for Ole Miss as they upset LSU.
Yeah, Ole Miss, we talked about them too a little bit, being one of those teams that they're very competitive, but they don't get the national love as they should. Well, they will now since they upset LSU. On the flip side, Brian Kelly, he has a lot of work to do. Once again, even though they started off hot this year, they're coming up duds in the big spot. So we'll see what happens with the LSU Tigers going forward. There's one game on this early slate that I want to discuss with you for a moment, and that was number 17, Alabama, holding off Georgia 24-21. I know that Alabama, they were in control for most of the game. I know Georgia mounted a good comeback, but for Alabama, who got off to a shaky start to start the year, do you believe that they're back, or do you need to see more from the Crimson Tide?
I think I need to see a little bit more here. I know Ty Simpson had a couple of big plays. I know they had one of their old linemen do kind of like a big guy TD that kind of like fired up Bama and such. But yeah, Kirby Smart, why did you take the points in that fourth quarter? Why didn't you? He's now 1-6 against Alabama. So you gotta wonder. Yeah, so you gotta wonder, like, did that kind of play into his head a little bit? That's why he tried to be the smart one and try to run for it instead of you were right there like on the 10. You could have just been a chip shot field goal and make Alabama try to win it on their end. But hey, I guess you're 1-7. Well, you're 1-6 now. He's 1-7. Yeah, it kind of plays to your psyche a little bit. So it's probably why he did what he did. But now he's gonna have nightmares about that.
Yeah, that's why we outsmart yourself sometimes. You think you're better than you think you are, and this is what happens. Disaster happens right in front of your feet. Is it time to take Texas A&M seriously? They beat Notre Dame a couple weeks ago at Irish Stadium. They're ranked number 9 in the country, right? Aggies seriously, and do you think they have a serious shot participating in the college football playoff? Even though it's still early.
Yeah, I mean, Marcel Reed, 207 yards and such. I know Le'Veon Moss had 140 or just under 140 rushing yards. They beat Notre Dame. They held off a pretty solid Auburn squad. They do have a tough one against Mississippi State, on Saturday. So we'll see. They still got to play LSU, Missouri, South Carolina, who had a nice bounce back win, and Texas. So they still got a big test here. So yeah, I think they're right there. But like I said, we're only like about a third through the season, so that might be a little early because they still got a very tough schedule. But I think so far, Craig Athletics guys are playing well. So those need to be in the conversation.
Before we get to Illinois and USC, another big game, and I thought we talked about this last Friday on the show in the Big Ten. The Indiana Hoosiers barely, I do mean barely, beat the Iowa Hawkeyes at Kinnick Stadium 20-16. As we said on Friday, Indiana was favored by 8.5. I told you I did not like that. I thought that Iowa was going to play inspired. Well, play inspired they did, but they had their chances. But Indiana, they're proving to everybody else, including yours truly, that last year was not a fluke. They still are carrying on this season undefeated.
Yeah, the ghost of Kinnick Stadium in the middle of the afternoon, or in this case, in the middle of the afternoon. Usually it's at night, but in the middle of the afternoon. So they were afraid to throw the ball, but look, Fernando Mendoza, he made a couple of big passes. They actually did pass, and they were able to hold off. And their defense made a couple of big stops late for them. So again, look, again, it's not about style points, but if you're Indiana, you take the wins. They still got a long way to go, but we'll see what happens there. Real quick, Iowa State. No trouble with Arizona. Tennessee needed overtime, but they did beat Tennessee, Mississippi State, I should say. Georgia Tech, they needed overtime, but they stay undefeated. They beat Wake Forest, so did Vanderbilt. I know our buddies Josh Fryman and Mike Berman will be happy about this one as Missouri took care of business against UMass. Notre Dame, no trouble with Arkansas. Now Bobby Petrino's back there. I guess everything old is new again. And BYU held off Colorado. Yeah. And then, of course, Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, called his guys after the game. They did have an early lead. But, again, that's coaching, folks. But, again, I digress.
Yeah, I watched the majority of the game. Colorado had a strong start, but they just could not put a touchdown on the board to separate themselves from the BYU Cougars, and they ended up losing that game. Now I want to talk about the Illinois USC game. Of course, the final line night, they dominated early. USC made a comeback. Both teams had trick plays, but I forgot the running back's name who fumbled the ball for Illinois as Gus Johnson on the call said, "Holy Chicago!" And so that swung the momentum back into the Trojans' favor. Of course, the Trojans went back down and scored late to take the lead. And of course, the Illinois kicker Bobby Orland nailed the game winner with no time left on the clock. As we told you on the show last Friday, the final line they got embarrassed the previous week at Indiana. They were going to play much better at home. The national spotlight really didn't get to them. The offensive line, I'm very proud of them, including Ole Kreutz's son at center. He led the charge there. So I thought that they took it to the Trojans. Despite the 2 turnovers, Luke Altmaier played well. He had 2 touchdowns on his own, but they overcome their early mistakes, the 2 fumbles. They got it done in crunch time at home.
Yeah, Caden, that's who you're talking about. He had that fumble that kind of kept USC in it. He did catch the big TD catch, but of course, USC was able to come back. But it's one of those things where you're just like, okay, Lincoln Riley, you got to play defense in the Big Ten, dude. So you give them over 500 yards and such. So that's a big. Yeah, that's not going to do it for you there. Illinois, nice bounce back win, but really, folks, you're going to sort in the field. You were favored at home, and these are not. I'm sorry, they're not the Carson Palmer. Mike Williams, Matt Liner, Reggie Bush, those are Lindell White. Those are not those USC squads. So, let's take it back me a little bit there. I know they were ranked higher than you, like 21 and 23, but come on, folks. But again, I digress there. Now, your buddy PJ Fleck went a little crowd surfing after their game as they held off Rutgers 31-28. They 3-1 right now. Duke, no trouble with Syracuse. Louisville beats Pittsburgh. Tennessee beats Kansas State. K-State with a nice bounce back win against UCF. Northwestern, they held off UCLA. UCLA played a lot better, the last couple of weeks since Deshaun Foster was fired. So Northwestern, nice win. They could I think both these teams can go to a bowl game, so we'll see what happens there. Cal beats Boston College. Baylor beat Oklahoma State. Utah beats West Virginia. Northern Illinois lose to San Diego State in the baseball score. That's history is not a typo, folks. That actually was the final score of that game.
LaKeena McGee special.
good old NFC football from the early and mid '80s. So, but I digress. Virginia Tech with a nice win against NC State. Memphis beat Florida Atlantic. Stanford held off San Jose State. Boise State no trouble with Appalachian State. Like I said earlier, South Carolina with a nice bounce back win against Kentucky 35-13. And that's your summary schedule for this weekend in college football.
One more note from the USC Illinois game. Do you know? Without googling, do you know the last time that the Fighting Illini defeated USC?
Oh, good lord! It's been a while. I would say
4, 3,
1980
2,
something. I forgot.
1.
I don't know. Shoot, like 1980 something.
It was on the broadcast November of 1989. And guess who was the quarterback for the Fighting Illini? Without googling,
Jeff George.
Yes, ding, ding, ding.
Yeah, Howard Griffin. Yeah, Howard Griffin was the running back. I mean,
Yep.
I remember. I watched that game. I remember watching that game in 1989. I know that SC was going through a little bit of kind of a rebuild that year, so they were able to. The Illini, to their credit, they were able to go to the Peach Bowl, I think, that year. So yeah, I remember that. Yeah, it's been that long, folks. I guess you can see why some of those folks were still on the field, but
before
still.
Jeff George. Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
And Jeff George, of course, he would get drafted by the Indianapolis Colts in 1990 in the NFL draft. Quickly looking at the schedule for this week's games. So, like I said, we'll do a deeper dive into our next show on Friday. Texas at Florida, Penn State at UCLA, among other matchups. Down to earth at 2-2. So, still a big game for Illinois. Will it be a big letdown after a big win on Saturday? We'll see about that. And a couple other matches, Boise State at Notre Dame. Kent State against Oklahoma. Minnesota, PJ Fleck under the lights at the Horseshoe on NBC.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll have Miami and Florida State on ABC. I definitely cannot wait for that one.
Those old games from back in the day. We know those two teams know each other well. They and both teams are in the top 15. So we'll see. I know it's a little bit of a downer since Florida State lost to Virginia, but also Penn State, UCLA, and Vanderbilt. Remember, we'll see if Alabama can get their revenge against Vanderbilt, because remember they beat them last year. I'm talking about Vandy did. So we'll see if they can build off that win against Georgia.
That's right.
And yep. So Mississippi State and also Texas A&M. That might be an upset alert. I'm talking about A&M. We'll see. But so a nice slate of games this weekend. But we'll talk more about that coming up on Friday.
All right. You're listening to Second City Sports on Sports Zone Chicago. LaKeena here with you. Don't forget, Cubs fans will have your official playoff preview with Evan Altman from CubsInsider.com, as the Cubs will host the San Diego Padres in the National League Wildcard Series, the best 2 out of 3 from Wrigley Field. We'll have our the playoff preview coming up in our next break. But yesterday, LaKeena, game 162, both the Cincinnati Reds and the New York Mets lost, but it was the Cincinnati Reds who owned the tiebreaker. They'll get the last wild card spot. They'll take on the Los Angeles Dodgers in LA starting tomorrow. And now that officially the whole MLB playoff field is set.
Yeah, that was an interesting. That was a very interesting result yesterday there. So that was definitely tough. I'm sure that was very, very tough. I know Steve Cohen, who's the GM for the Mets. I know that he said he apologized to Mets fans, saying that, look, we'll try to do better next year. And P. Alonso once again is going to test the trade market. So, I'm sure that's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. But yeah,
come to Chicago, come to the South Side. We need you.
and we'll look, like I said, we'll see about the Cincy, how they do against the Dodgers. We'll talk more about that with Evan come up in a few minutes here. But so I'm thinking this could be interesting to see what happens with this, because I know that you said that that Cincy could sneak into the playoffs, and I think they did just that. But the Mets, that was just brutal. Now the Cubs, on the other hand, we'll talk more about that. They took care of business, and they got the first the wild card home field, so they get to host the Padres. So both teams are going to be coming off sweeps. So
You're listening to Second City Sports on Sports Zone Chicago. Sid the Kid here with you. Hopefully, LaKeena McGee, my partner, will rejoin us coming up. But we're discussing the playoffs for the Chicago Cubs as they'll take on the San Diego Padres tomorrow. Of course, the injury news came down over the weekend that Cade Horton will be lost for the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. LaKeena, as you rejoin me now, we talked about how this starting rotation for the Chicago Cubs has been challenged all year with injuries with Shota Imanaga early in the year. Justin Steele is out for the year. But I think as we focus in on the San Diego series, the playoff rotation, I think for the first 3 games will be set. We don't know officially who's going to start for the Cubs tomorrow, but I think your 3 starters, should this series go all 3 games with the Padres, I think it will be Matthew Boyd, Shota Imanaga, and Jameson Taillon, who had another strong outing in the series against St. Louis. So I think if you're a Cubs fan, are you satisfied with at least those 3?
Yeah, I think, if you're going to get those, I think Boyd has to be your starter, I think. I feel like he's really going to be the more – next to Horton, he was the most consistent. He had a couple of hiccups, but he's been more consistent. Taillon, I think he found his groove. I know he pitched well yesterday in that last game of the regular season. So, yeah, I think he's going to be a number 2 guy. And should it get to number 3, I would say you have Shota there because as much as I love Shota, I don't really trust him at this point. So I think I would just, keep him in the back end, for game 3 if it gets to that. So, yeah, I think those are like my 3. If I were, we'll see what Craig Counsell does. We probably won't learn about that until after we get off. But we'll see if Boyd does get that start in game 1 tomorrow. But yeah, it should be an interesting series for them going up against San Diego. They're very you got to deal with Tatis Jr. You got to deal with a couple other guys too. But there's no reason why the Cubs shouldn't win that series. But again, you never know.
On the flip side for San Diego, Nick Pivetta will at least get the start tomorrow in game 1 for the Padres. You mentioned offensively Fernando Tatis Jr. Let's not forget about Manny Machado as well as Xavier Bogaerts as well. And Jackson Merrill, who plays a hell of a center field for the Padres. I know we're going to get unseasonably like weather here in Chicago, which I'm not complaining, by the way. It's going to be near 80 degrees around there for the next week. So balls may be flying out of there. I get your worry about Shota Imanaga. He occasionally has the ability to give up a couple of gophers, and you cannot afford to do that, especially in a playoff series. But on the flip side for Chicago offensively, Michael Busch had a great year, 32, 33 home runs from the first base side. Dansby Swanson said the batting average is low, but he gave you 23, 24 home runs this year. Who else are you looking forward to be that unsung hero for Chicago there to advance to play Milwaukee in the National League Division Series next weekend?
I think Ian Happ was the last player that was on that squad the last time the Cubs made the playoffs. I think he is definitely going to be a guy that I have a key. I'm going to have an eye on. Also, Seiya as well. I think Seiya could be one of those guys that could be an unsung hero for the Cubs. You talked about Nico Horner. PCA, I know he struggled. He did kind of find his groove a little bit in the last couple of weeks. Also, Kyle Tucker. I mean, it looks like he is going to play. Again, we'll see how he looks because he hasn't played in almost a month. So he hasn't really been right for the last couple of months. So, and we know he roasted the cage before that year Houston won the World Series. So we'll see if he can kind of, we'll see a little bit of that Kyle Tucker that we saw in Houston that led them to the World Series.
Well, and speaking of Kyle Tucker, I'm sure he's going to be at the DH spot for the foreseeable future. And so you're not going to risk his health being out there and right field with that calf. He's better. I think good for the time being. I know Ian Happ has traded places with him, being that leadoff hitter. We'll see what Craig Counsell does with that. And at third base, Matthew Shaw, power-wise, has been seen on the big stage against the Padres.
Yeah, definitely going to need. I know he's been kind of up about Shaw's he's been up there too, but he's kind of ebbs and flows a little bit as well. So that's really going to be the thing here for me when it comes to Matt Shaw. So he's another guy that I'm going to be looking out for as well. Now Colin Ray, perhaps he's down from the bullpen. Could he be a guy that I know he might be a guy that might get that start a little bit in that game 3 start, especially if Shota's still a little bit iffy. So that's another guy they're looking out for as well. So yeah, I think the good news is for Craig Counsell, he's got a lot of pieces to work with. That's probably a good thing, especially when you're in a short series like this best of 3 wild card series. You know that the Wrigley's going to be rocking. That's a good thing about getting those home field in this wild card round. You get all 3 games at home. If it gets that far, and you know that place is going to be rocking. The weather's going to be real nice, so it's going to be packed. It's going to be loud. It's going to be during a lot of those games are going to be in the afternoon as well. So, we'll talk about that with our buddy Evan Altman after the break. But yeah, it's going to be I'm sure it's going to be really, really electric there.
Speaking of Evan Altman, we'll kick off our last segment of the show with him from CubsInsider.com, previewing the Cubs and Padres. Will it go all 3 games, or will the Cubs leave home disappointed? And we'll get his predestination. You listen to Second City Sports only right here on Sports Zone Chicago.
Hey, it's your boy, the Superback, Sean Sierra, and be sure to follow Sports Zone Chicago on all social media platforms, on Facebook, Instagram, and our Roku channel. You can find us at Sports Zone Chicago, and on Twitter, we are at Sports Zone Shy. Also, be sure to download our mobile app so you can take Sports Zone Chicago with you on the go.
Got it done here. Ouch! And we're gonna make sure you lit this time. Ouch! You're not gonna get me this time.
Ow, Manny!
Whoops! Let's try an easy one.
Every day, we take steps to keep the people we love safe, but some health risks are easy to miss. Ticks hiding in the yard can spread germs, like the ones that cause Lyme disease. Mice searching for food can spread bacteria that makes us sick. Mosquitoes lay eggs in standing water and can spread West Nile virus and more. Cockroaches are drawn to water in the home, leaving behind allergens that can trigger asthma attacks. Common pests can threaten our health. Learn how to protect your family at pestworld.org.
Hey, this is Corey McGee, and I listen to Sean and Maya on the morning show.
Welcome back to Second City Sports on the hashtag Bears Victory Monday edition. You're locked and loaded, and we're live in the living color right here on Sports Zone Chicago. LaKeena McGee is she over here. Sidney Brown here. Over here is me. You can follow yours truly on the Twitter, X, and the IG at SidKid80. Once again, it's SidKid80. That's SIDKID80. That's SIDKID80.
You follow LaKeena McGee on the Twitter, execute again at IG.
We're going to preview the Cubs playoff matchup against the San Diego Padres with our special guest coming up. If you have any questions or comments regarding that subject or any of the rest of the matchups from the Major League Baseball playoffs for 2025, you can definitely hit us up at Sports Zone Chicago's Facebook page or Sports Zone Chicago on YouTube.
All right, so let's get right to it, Sid. We got a lot to talk with him about, from Padres and Cubs to the MLB wild card. He's the fabulous blogger for CubsInsider.com. He's the one, the only, the super cool Mr. Evan Altman. Evan, how are you?
I'm good. I always appreciate that kind of an intro. I feel like I'm pretty hyped up now. I came in here feeling a little tired. Now I'm wide awake, ready to rock. Let's go.
All right, well, let's get right to it and talk about who's going to be the game. Who do you think is going to be the game one starter for the Cubs now that we all had? I think most of us had Cade Horton as a starter, but now since he's out, who's going to be that number one guy coming into tomorrow for the first game?
Yeah, it certainly looks like all the signs are pointing toward Matt Boyd taking the bump in that one. He'll be on an extra day of rest. You know, he's looked a little rough in the second half, and that's kind of troublesome, but the Padres don't do really well against left-handed pitchers. And again, having him on that extra rest as they come down the stretch makes the most sense just with the way everything else lines up. So part of that, like you said, it's almost by default, right? Because there is no Cade Horton, unfortunately. That's just a really tough situation. And then everyone else that could set up for that, again, it can't be Tyon. He'd be on short rest. Shota Imanaga, same thing. Colin Ray, I think they want to save for maybe game 2 or 3. And so, again, I would say it's Boyd who gets the bump to open things up.
Sid?
I know the bullpen has been an issue with Craig Counsell all year long. Of course, the first couple months of the year, you tried to find guys to get his 6 outs. Right now, Daniel Palencia, I know he got hurt about a month ago, and Craig Counsell threw him in one of the games over the last week or so. Do you think Counsell will go to closer by committee here as we get the playoffs started tomorrow?
Yeah, and I think when you look at it, and this goes without saying really for it's just playoff baseball in general, but I think also when you look at what Counsell has done historically, right, not just with the Cubs, but certainly when we saw Milwaukee, and they're still finding success, but there were times when it felt like that team was it was a mediocre starting rotation, decent offense, and just a really, really strong bullpen. And what I think you'll see from Counsell, and we've seen this a little bit from him, you know, Brad Keller's been probably their most consistent, or definitely the most consistent reliever, although he's rarely used to close games. They would rather use him if you're coming up and say you got your 2, 3, 4 hitters and it's the 7th or 8th inning in a close game. He's probably going with Keller. You know, we've seen Andrew Kittredge, who hadn't saved any games, I don't believe, before coming to Chicago, and he's picked up several saves down the stretch, largely because they leaned on what you would maybe consider your top arms, and Kittredge has been very good, but use those top arms when necessary, right? You got to get 27 outs. It doesn't matter who gets them and when they get them. It just matters that you get your 27 outs and you have a bigger score by the time the game is done. So I do think we're going to see him be aggressive, whether that's pulling starters early, whether that's maybe using an opener. I could see that in game 2. And then again, somebody like Keller, Palencia, maybe being used early, just whenever that situation calls for it and what the matchup makes sense to do. I don't think you're going to see a traditional kind of usage of, hey, starter goes 6, and then you string together the last 3 with relievers in that order.
Who do you have your eye on in this series with the Padres? Is it those guys like Seiya, guys like Ian Happ, guys like PCA? Who are kind of like your keys in this series with the Padres?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it and how they've been hitting, I mean, when you look at what Michael Busch has been doing over the last really like 2 weeks or so. He's been super, super hot. Last week as well. Seiya Suzuki closed hot, bunch of homers with 5 home runs in the last 4 games, somewhere in that. So he got over 30 homers. He got over 100 RBIs on the season. But when I look at Bush and Suzuki, and those are the 2 guys who, when the offense was struggling, they were struggling. Now that they've kind of started hitting again, we're seeing a team, I think, even though they won, the last game only 2-0, but in the previous 5 games, the Cubs had scored 5 or more runs in each of those. That's the first time they had done that since, I want to say, back to early June. They just hadn't been consistently putting up crooked numbers, but lo and behold, you get those sluggers to start doing it. And the fact that those guys are right there at your, somewhere in the top 5, right? Bush is typically leading off. If it's a righty on the mound, Suzuki's kind of moved around a little bit. But if those 2 are hot, and it'd be really easy to say Kyle Tucker as well. To me, that's a no-brainer. Like, Kyle Tucker has to be the superstar hitter. But if those other guys can stay hot, they're capable of carrying the team all on their own. So gives guys like PCA a little bit of room to kind of play. And he's looked better lately. He's hitting the ball hard. But I think as long as his defense remains as good as it's been, if you can get those 2 thumpers to really start to continue, I guess, hitting the ball out of the yard. So maybe, hey, if it stays warm in Chicago over the next few days, I think that bodes very, very well for the Cubs and their ability to hit more home runs than the Padres and move on.
Evan Altman, friend of the show from Cubs Insider, is joining us right here on Second City Sports on Chicago City. LaKeena here with you, previewing the Cubs, Padres, and L Wildcard Series for 2025. All 3 games will take place at Wrigley Field starting tomorrow. It's the best 2 out of 3 series there. The winner moves on to play the Milwaukee Brewers in Brewtown on next Saturday. Evan, we talked about the trade deadline, of course. Michael Soroka didn't really pan out as the Cubs thought, but one name that did prevail in the trade deadline, in my opinion, was Willie Castro from the Minnesota Twins. As you and I and LaKeena knows, every year in the playoffs, you always have that one unsung hero. Talk to us about how important Willie Castro will be for this Cubs team. Should they move on in this series against the Padres and move on to face Milwaukee in the NLDS?
Yeah, I think, just the same way that we talked about kind of using relievers however you need to. I think Castro's ability to play all over the field, to hit from both sides, like he can come in, whether that's as a pinch hitter, a defensive replacement, and I think what you'll see when you have some guys out there like a Justin Turner, like a Moises Ballesteros, who are going to be a bit more positionally challenged, shall we say. Right now with Tucker healthy, he'll be DHing. We'll see Seiya Suzuki in right field. That really leaves Ballesteros without a spot. Now, we did see him start at catcher in that last game. Don't expect to see that in the postseason unless it's in an emergency, but that's a guy who could come on, right, if you need a pinch hitter for one of your other 2 catchers, and then you can swap that out. You can let him hit, although or then maybe he comes in if you've got a lefty batter in there, but they need a righty. They can swap them out and then move Castro into whatever position, literally any position in the outfield he can play. We've seen him play third and second if need be. So, again, I think his value, I don't want to say it's not there as a hitter. We haven't seen it as well with the Cubs, but he's such a nice little jack-of-all-trades piece that allows Counsell to make other moves knowing he's not going to have to burn a position by using Castro there. So I think he's kind of the duct tape, if you will, in this situation that just kind of holds things together.
Now, can you see this as kind of like one of those little slug it out kind of things where the weather's going to be very unseasonably warm out in Wrigley these next 3 days? So do you see, the Cubs, the Padres kind of go into maybe like a 10-9 or 8-9, type of games where it might have to be dependent on the slugging might be just as important, if not more important, than the pitching?
It's possible, although, despite some of the big names they've got out in San Diego, they don't hit a bunch of home runs. Now, part of that, you get the ballpark out there, you get the marine layer. We've seen sometimes that can kind of knock things down. But, Wrigley lately, and depending again on what the wind is doing, it's been blowing out a little bit over the last couple weeks here. But it's entirely possible that could turn around and knock things down. And I think what we're going to see I don't think we'll see as much of a slugfest in this simply because what we're talking about, we talked about the Cubs bullpen a little bit, but if there is a bullpen that's better, it's the Padres. These are possibly the best 2 relief corps that you'll find across Major League Baseball. And so I think both managers are going to be, they obviously very well understand that, and I think are going to be aggressive in moving to those pens. So we'll see, although, again, you could see that flipped around, right? I think it's just going to depend on what is the weather doing. If it stays in the 70s, 80s, and we're seeing winds blowing out to the center, it doesn't matter how good your bullpen is, because they could get one, throw a perfect pitch that a guy just gets under just enough, and it gets carried out into the second, third row of the bleachers. So I don't expect that. I think these bullpens are going to hold serve both sides, and it may come down to having the manufacturer runs late in order to kind of get that extra run or get that little insurance bid across to make sure it works.
Sid? Sid? I think his Wi-Fi's been
annoyed
acting up.
by him using air quotes here because of the big contract that the front office gave him a couple years ago. I know this year he finished around 240. He gave you 23, 24 home runs. What do you expect from him in this year's playoff series against the Padres? Do you think he'll come up big, or do you think that all that pressure should be put on him, especially the amount of money that he got from the Cubs a couple of years ago?
I think what we'll see again, and I could spread this across multiple different players there as well. Having not been in the postseason for so long, I think there's a measure of urgency across any of these guys. But I do think when we're talking about, some of those key guys, some of the dudes who were legitimately out there, whether we're talking Happ, Swanson, whether we're talking Tucker, who's in search of the big deal, I think you've got a lot of guys who are out there looking to prove it. And I do think, though, with this being a veteran-laden team, I know there are, we talked about Ballesteros, and there are some other young guys in there, but I think we're going to see these veterans step up. I really do. I think we're going to see some really good stuff out of Swanson, not just defensively, but he's been able to drive the ball over the yard as well. And then again, Ian Happ as somebody who's kind of looked at as the team leader at this point, the de facto captain, and those guys I think have a lot riding on this, right? Just from their, I don't know if we want to say legacy, but in terms of expectations of them. And again, I think we'll see some of those guys kind of, I think they'll serve us up some highlights here and there. And again, with Swanson, I kind of equate him to like Pete Crow Armstrong, to where even if the offense isn't great, that's a guy who in a playoff series, when you really, really need it most, that defense up the middle is going to be very important. And I think that gives the Cubs a huge advantage with what they've got going there. And again, you look at Happ out there and left, you look at all the gold gloves they've got, I do think that sets up really well for them playing not just this series, but if they're able to advance as well.
Well, let's talk about the rest of those series, and we'll start with the other National League wildcard series. You got Cincinnati and the Dodgers. Of course, the Reds got hot; they were able to get into the playoffs. The Dodgers, not like the Dodgers that we've seen, through different injuries and such. Where do you see this 3-gamer?
It's impossible to bet against the Dodgers, right? I mean, like, even though they haven't played as well, although part of me, there's that sense that you see the momentum, you see a team getting hot. The Reds are playing with nothing to lose, to me, right? They've got the house money. They're playing the big bad Yankees or Dodgers, I guess either way, right? When you look at some of these teams who are spending all the money and doing all this, nobody expected the Reds to get to this. They managed to leapfrog and kind of actually back their way in, but get past the Mets there late. I like them to put up a fight, but I just think at the end of the day, when you look at all the firepower on that Dodgers team, and when you see that Ohtani's going to be starting for them, or at least pitching in some form or fashion, they've got too much to me for the Reds to overcome. But But it feels like maybe a Rocky 1 situation, right, where they actually come out there and punch the Dodgers in the face a couple times and maybe make them reconsider things. But in the end, I do think that Apollo Creed, because people forget that, but Apollo Creed ends up winning this first round. Although I think they give the Dodgers a little scare.
Yep.
Let's switch it over to the American League and give us your thoughts about the Cleveland Guardians. Of course, there were 15.5 games out in early September. Of course, that's the biggest deficit to win a division ever in Major League Baseball. Of course, the Tigers got back in a wild card situation. What would you, from your vantage point, what chances do you give Cleveland to at least make it to the World Series? Because people forget almost the same squad minus their closer this year. They got to the ALCS last year before bowing out to the Yankees in 5 games.
Yeah, I mean, that's another one of those, right? I just talked about the Reds kind of taking that momentum and going, and Cleveland just feels like maybe it's something with the Ohio teams, I don't know, but they are so scrappy. And for them, this was a prolonged comeback, as you mentioned, like 15.5 games, that's even if you won every single game and the team you're chasing loses every single game, you're talking about over 2 weeks of baseball just to get that. And again, that's entirely impossible. It never happened, but for them to have done this over a long period of time, and I feel like when we talk about teams pressing and other ones being loose, to me, the Guardians have a significant advantage over the Tigers right now, right? To lose a lead like that, even though they still ended up sneaking in, I think that has to be weighing heavily on them. So I really like Cleveland to advance. I like them. The AL to me is much more wide open. I think, it's tough. You look at the National League, I would put both the Phillies and the Dodgers ahead of the Brewers. Maybe that's just kind of sour grapes. But when I look over at the AL, that to me is wide open. I really think Cleveland could make a run, even if it's not the World Series again. I think they can make the ALCS and absolutely go toe to toe with whatever team they're playing there.
And of course, last but not least, in the wild card, they got the Red Sox and Yankees. Again, the playoffs this time in the wild card. I just saw Bob Nightingale report that Lucas Giolito, of course, the Red Sox starter, he's been having elbow trouble. He's off the roster for this series. So where do you see this?
Yeah, I think rivalries, again, you can never count anybody out. To me, though, when you look at the firepower and you look at what Aaron Judge can do, just him all by himself, I think is such a game changer, right, on a couple different levels. Although it's kind of funny to see what the Red Sox did, because it kind of looked like they were punting a little bit, getting rid of Devers. They traded him over to San Francisco. Things look good. And then all of a sudden, so you traded the guy who people thought was going to be your best hitter, you just had a massive extension with. They get rid of him. Boston goes on to the playoffs. The Giants fall on their face so bad that they just fired their manager, which, I will go back and say that's exactly, I'm not saying it's on one person, but I'm saying that's exactly why I didn't want the Cubs to go after Devers and why I felt like that maybe there's more to it than just the numbers that he puts up. But again, I think you can never, a heated rivalry like that, I think there will be some back and forth, but the Yankees, to me, I think come out of that one.
We're heading down a home stretch with that guy, Evan Altman from CubsInsider.com. He's hanging out here with us right here, 25 MLB playoffs. Evan, we had a couple of disappointing teams this year that did not make the playoffs. I'll give you the choice which team was the most disappointing in your eyes. Or the New York Mets, who lost their last 2 of their last 3 in Miami against the Marlins. Which of those 2 teams were the most disappointing to you in terms of missing the playoffs this year?
I mean, I'm not disappointed by the Mets missing it at all, but to me, it's got to be the Mets, which, I mean, at one point they had the best record in baseball. They have a massive payroll. They added Juan Soto, and everybody's touting him as this MVP candidate, which he certainly is. I mean, he had a fantastic season. It's pretty crazy. Like, when you're so good, that, hitting almost going 40-40 and doing the things that he did almost goes overlooked because of what was happening to his team down the stretch there. But to me, again, with the money that they spent on that team, with the superstar, not just him, but then Pete Alonso had a huge season as well, that has to be the most disappointing. I mean, it probably would have been the Tigers if they had fallen all the way out of it. Then I would have leapfrogged them over everybody because it's like, man, you can't blow a lead that big. Like, that's awful. But look at what, like I said, the Mets, #1 record in baseball at one point. And then just in the second half, it was just disastrous. So, and we've seen this from them before. They continue to spend huge money. The Dodgers are doing it and they're winning. So the Dodgers are disappointed if they don't win 90-plus games. The Mets are spending on that same par, and if not more, just massively going over the competitive balance tax thresholds and spending all that extra dead money, if you will. And they've got literally nothing to show for it at this point. So has to be the Mets.
Who among the 4 teams that have the bye that you would see is the favorite? I'm not going to ask you for a World Series prediction yet, Evan, but who among like the 4 teams that got the bye, the Blue Jays, the Mariners, the Brewers, and the Phillies, who among those 4 you think do you feel are the favorites right now?
I've got to go Phillies. They've got the experience in getting there, right? None of those other teams, the Brewers have consistently fallen flat in the playoffs. The Blue Jays haven't had success in the postseason, nor have the Mariners for quite some time. There's some great stories there, and certainly they're playing well toward the end and did well enough to not only clinch postseason position, but to beat out all these other teams we're talking about here. But I look at the Phillies again as the combination of experience and star power. They've got good pitching. They can hit home runs. That works out really well. And they've been there and done that pretty routinely, getting to the postseason year after year. So I like the Phillies.
Last question from me, Evan. I want to ask you about LaKeena's other favorite team. That's the Seattle Mariners. Of course, they finally got together with their offense. Eugenio Suarez, Julio Riley has had a nice year. They had the offense to go with that strong pitching and bullpen. What chances do you give the Seattle Mariners to represent the American League in this year's World Series?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when you look at somebody like what Raleigh has done and going 60 homers and, being able to do that from both sides of the plate as a catcher, no less, when you're talking about a legit MVP front runner, that's the kind of guy who he can change games with his power. They've got an excellent young pitching staff as well, and they're playing hot. So I really, really like their chances, even if it's just him individually. And I love the idea of seeing I would consider them a little more old school, even though the batting averages aren't quite there. But give me Cal Raleigh and Kyle Schwarber squaring off in a World Series, right? Just these 2 big old husky boys who can hit home runs like nobody's business, and who just, you got Big Dumper. Like, who doesn't want to see this guy? Like, I don't know, that just looks that's just fun to me, to see guys like that who are just they do. And again, Raleigh does other things well, but primarily when you're looking at this, just they do this one thing as well as anyone else out there. And again, I think that's the kind of thing that could drive the team just all on its own. So certainly with having a historic season like that, I'd like to see him be able to get a little bit more press kind of nationally, being out there on the West Coast. I think a lot of people don't really get to pay attention or get to see too much of him outside of highlights. So, I'd like to see the Mariners do well. And that's a team, it's hard unless you're a division rival or something. It's hard to root against them. I think a lot of us have fond memories of that, just going back to Junior Griffey and, when Randy Johnson got going out there. And I'm thinking Jay Buhner and Tino and Edgar Martinez and all those guys from back in the day. So, I got a little soft spot for the Mariners as well. So it'd be good to see them find some success.
Yeah, it's a real shame those guys didn't win a World Series, but that's a different conversation, Evan. But yeah, now we won't hold you to this. You can write this in pencil, but who do you have in the World Series for 2025?
I mean, I guess, I think I kind of tipped it with the Phillies there. I think I just think they're going to find a way to get it done again across the board. So much talent, so much experience, and then I really think I don't have a lot of faith as I kind of look across. I look at Cleveland and Detroit. I look at New York and Boston. So again, I think I am. I think I'm going to go with the Mariners. I will. Let's go Mariners, Phillies, and I think what the heck. Let's just go with it. Let's say Mariners in 6.
Yep. Yeah. All right. That should be interesting to see what happens here. That was Evan Altman from CubsInsider.com. So, Evan, where can people find all your great work and on social media and all that other good stuff?
Yeah, you check out. Just go to CubsInsider.com. You can find me on X at the Evan Altman. You can search Cubs Insider on Facebook. So we're all over the place. Blue Sky, wherever else, YouTube, anything out there, just search Cubs Insider. You should be able to find us.
Sid?
Yeah. Evan, thank you for joining us as always on the program. The great insight on the Cubs and Padres.
All right. Thanks, Evan. This has been so much fun. We got to get you back on. Thanks, Evan.
Sounds good to me. Take it easy.
All right. Thank you. All right. That was Evan. All right. That's Evan Altman from Cubs Insider. Now, we got a couple more minutes left, Sid. Little Ryder Cup action, from upstate New York. Despite the U.S. comeback, the falls just short as the European team held them off for their third Ryder Cup in the last 4 Ryder Cups, and some would say it's an upset just because they were, it was U.S. home soil. But the U.S. did make it interesting in the singles for a little bit. I know Cam Young beat Justin Rose. I know Scheffler beat McIlroy, but unfortunately, Shane Lowry did sink his putt to have his match with Russell Henley, and he was able to, retain the cup for Europe. Also, to the rest of the matches, I know Griffin won his match, but the rest of the matches after that were half, so they really didn't matter. So I think, unfortunately for the U.S., once again, they lose another one. This time they lose again in their home soil. This is the second or last, 3 times they've had the Ryder Cup in their home soil. They've lost. Let's talk about the U.S. team.
I think that's what hurts. I think that's what hurts the most when you have home field advantage, quote unquote, and it's on your own soil. You can protect it and hold through. But just like in any other sport, you fall behind early. You trail big, you come back, as we were talking about with the Cleveland Guardians. They actually finished the job and win their division. But in just any single game in any sport, you spend all the energy coming back, tying it up, or getting within striking distance. Do you have enough to cross the finish line? Sometimes you do, many times you don't. And that's what happened with our U.S. golfers. Not saying that our golfers stink at anything like that, but it's just that your opposition did a better job of maintain that pace. So congratulations to the Europeans. They won this year's cup. And let's see if our golfers could do it again next year. Could try one more time next year.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see what they're gonna do, because Luke Donald did a really great job kind of spreading everything out, especially with the singles and such. So I think that really helped the Europeans there. And I think, look, as great as that rally was by the U.S., they were just too big of a hole. So it was just too deep, and they were able to kind of hold them. Like I said, Lowry hit to take that putt to have his match with Russ Henley. So unfortunately, they were able to kind of hold off the U.S. with the late stirs there. Now, the next Ryder Cup will be in 2 years, in 2027. It will be in Adare Manor in Ireland. It'll be the first time since 2006 where the U.S. got their butts kicked. I remember that Ryder Cup because the U.S. got their butts kicked that year in the 2006 Ryder Cup. So, we'll see. And,
maybe we'll do better over there.
I mean, like, Keegan Bradley, I know that there are going to be a couple of guys that are on the team that probably should not have been. Well, we'll let Christine read about it, when she comes back on with us on Friday. But, but a really good Ryder Cup for Europe, and they're taking it back home with them overseas. So look, they did what they had to do, and look, they took care of business.
Yep, and that's exactly what happened. Just a minute or two before we sign off, we know that Chicago Bulls Media Day is going on right now. We'll give you our thoughts of what was said, what was not said. We'll get into that on Friday. So we recognize that is going on over there at the practice facility near United Center. So we'll give you our thoughts coming up on the next show on Friday. Most media days are going on around the league as we speak. So we'll give you our thoughts on the Bulls on Friday. LaKeena, WNBA playoffs. It looks like the WNBA finals. So what's going on there?
Yeah, excuse me. The Mercury, they're back in the finals for the first time in a couple of years. They beat the Lynx in 4 games. And if you guys haven't, Alyssa Thomas, she finished just behind Asia Wilson for WNBA MVP. She led the way there with 23 points for them. Also, Satu Sabali had 21 points as they were able to help the Mercury hold off the Lynx there. Now, Aaliyah Boston had a big game. Also, Kalia Mitchell, they both had big games. They scored 23. I know Boston had 28 points, and Mitchell had 23 as a Fever were able to force a game 5. That'll be for all the marbles there. I think the Aces will win this one. I think Asia will show you guys why she's won 4 of these WNBA MVPs, but she does need some help. So she is going to need some help. So I think she will get that help. So hopefully they can win. They can help her win that game and go to the final there. Now that game is tomorrow on ESPN2 at 8:30 Chicago time. So if you guys are inclined, you can check that out. And the first game of WNBA final will be on Friday, so we'll talk about that as well. But yeah, like I said, for the final playoffs, the final spot against the Mercury, you can catch the Fever versus Aces game 5, the decider on tomorrow night at 8:30 on ESPN2.
All right, we got 10 seconds before we close it out. Just so the Cubs and Padres, who's your series winner and how many games? Remember, folks, it's the best 2 out of 3 for those who scored at home.
Mm-hmm. So I would say I think the Cubs will win it in 2. I think they'll bat it will do just enough to win it. So I think the Cubs will win in 2. But again, don't quote me.
I'm gonna try to keep my meatball Sox fandom out of this, but I have the Cubs in 3. They'll win the first game, lose the second game. They'll win it on Thursday, and then we'll preview the Cubs Brewers series on Friday on the show. We'll see how it all pans out.
And of course, Nick Peralta will go against to be announced. So I'm sure they'll make that announcement probably right after we go off. Now, your schedule for the wild card before that Cubs game, Detroit and Cleveland, they can't stay away from each other. They'll face each other tomorrow at noon Chicago time on ESPN. It'll be Therese School versus Gavin Williams. And after that Cubs Padres game, you got the Red Sox and the Yankees. At 5 o'clock on ESPN, it'll be Garrett Crochet against Max Fried. That should be a fun one. And that Reds-Dodgers series will be the nightcap at 8 on ESPN. You got Hunter Green. They haven't announced it yet, but that game will be after the Red Sox-Yankees game on ESPN at 8 o'clock.
And don't forget, all 3 of the Cubs-Padres Cubs series can be seen on free TV on ABC.
And then, yes, all the other games will be on ESPN as they are the home for the wild card round, both ABC and ESPN. So you can catch all the games on ABC and ESPN's family networks. And very smart, though, by MLB to put the Cubs and the Padres game on ABC. Very smart there on their part in the afternoon. But I know some people were kind of worried about that.
Yeah,
but
just like in '84.
Yeah. So so stuff. We'll see if it's a better result than the '84 one. But again, hopefully history doesn't repeat themselves there. But but yeah, of course, you guys can catch your
LaKeena
baseball. Yep.
All right, LaKeena, take us home.
You can follow my Kingdom again on the Twitter, again the IG.
You can follow your Shirley Sidney Brown on the Twitter, X, and the IG at SidKid80. Once again, it's SIDKID80, SIDKID80. That's SIDKID80. Be sure to download that Sports Zone Chicago app wherever you get your apps. Please follow Sports Zone Chicago on all social media platforms. Please subscribe to our podcast. We are located at War Media Podcast. That's WARR Media, PODCASTS. We're on all podcast platforms, including the iHeartRadio app. And while you're ready, please give War Media a follow at WARR Media on all socials. And thank you very much in advance for your support.
Like, share, subscribe, and tell your friends.
Be sure to catch Second City Sports live in living color every Monday, every Friday from 12:15 to 2:15 p.m. Central Standard Time, right here on Sports Zone Chicago. One more again, as the kids would say. Be sure to catch Second City Sports live in living color every Monday, every Friday from 12:15 to 2:15 p.m. Central Standard Time, right here on Sports Zone Chicago.
And of course, you can catch Sports Zone Chicago anytime, anywhere on the Sports Zone Chicago's Facebook and YouTube channel. So if you miss our show, Sean Sierra Sports, so Smoke Fellas, and all the other great content, or if you miss a segment, particularly something you want to check out, you can catch it anytime, anywhere on his Facebook, Sports Zone Chicago's Facebook and YouTube channels.
And you know we will provide.
And we also want to thank our buddy Evan Altman from CubsInsider.com for joining us today. Great insight and fun talk as always with him. So yeah, you can catch his stuff CubsInsider.com.
Yes, and if the Cubs should advance in these playoffs, hopefully we'll have him back on during these potential hope be a long Cup playoff run.
Let's hope. Well, let's hope for a great playoffs as always too, Sid. Enjoy the wild card round, and if you're going to the Cubs game, these Cubs games, these next 2, maybe 3 days, we'll see. But yeah, just be safe out there, folks. Enjoy the baseball, enjoy the Monday night games. And I know the matchups are a lot to be decided, but enjoy them still. I'm sure they're going to still get good numbers. Let's be real here, Sid. But yeah, so if you watch WNBA, you can catch that Fever Aces Game 5 tomorrow, and so much more. And enjoy this nice weather we're having. I'm sure it's going to be the last of the 80-degree weather for the rest of the year. So enjoy that. Be good to each other. Just be safe out there. For Sid, I'm LaKeena with Second City Sports on Sports Chicago, and we'll see you guys on Friday.
Let's go Padres!
No, your Tony Gwynn jersey. Go Cubs!